They laughed when the silent bride arrived, until the rancher said, "She is better than all of you." They laughed when the silent bride arrived, until the rancher said, "She is better than all of you." Wyoming Territory, 1879, a frontier church in Sagebrush Hollow. Morning burns, dust lifts, cedar breathes, and stained glass colors climb the worn planks. People squeeze the pews for spectacle, not blessing. Lila Voss stands in a modest white dress, lace gloves trembling, a silver locket bright at her throat. Pale green eyes scan faces that smile. She cannot hear the words but she reads the shapes. She can't hear the vows. Harlan's marrying a ghost. The priest opens his book. Harlan, waistcoat pressed, keeps his gaze pinned anywhere but her. When the question comes, he tips his chin and says, slow, cruel, "I can't marry a woman who doesn't even know her name." Laughter breaks like dropped crockery. Lila feels the room tilt. The bouquet slips and petals skitter like moths. Harlan's mother leans close. "We were doing you a favor." Before breath returns, a voice, iron steady, "That's enough." Boone Caldwell steps from the aisle's shadow, coat worn, eyes unflinching. He kneels and writes 2 words on Lila's gloved palm with a calloused thumb, "Safe now." Then he faces the crowd. "She is better than all of you. I will marry her now." Silence grips the rafters. A door hinge complains. A child's marble rolls and settles against a boot. Lila looks up and finds no pity in Boone's face, only a vow waiting to be spoken with deeds. Yet something else moves. Harlan's father, pale as tallow, clutching a folded deed. The priest startled, shifting to hide a telegram, a ring glinting on the floor that is not Lila's. If Boone hadn't spoken, which secret would have broken first, theirs or the town? What happens after this breath will change every name in Sagebrush Hollow. Golden morning light spills over wooden floors at the ranch, pouring through mullioned panes and pooling along seams between boards that carry the scent of resin, ash, and yesterday's embers. Lila Voss wakes to that buttered glow, still wearing the faded ribbon from the bouquet that scattered across church planks, fingers resting on the spot where Boone Caldwell traced "Safe now" upon her palm. She keeps still, taking stock, reading the room by sight and touch, the way others rely upon echoes. A kettle cooling on the iron stove, red coals breathing low inside the hearth, a dust mote whirled drifting above a braided rug, a coat folded with care over a chair. Boone is not in the doorway, yet his presence lingers in the way the chair legs tuck square with the table, the bed quilt pulled to the same height on both sides, the boots set parallel near the wall as if their owner refuses chaos any foothold. Outside, wind combs the grass, drawing ripples the eye easily calls waves. She watches those shifting lines and gives them the title she once saved for songs: movement without sound, meaning without noise. Her heart, jittery through the night, clicks into a calmer pace. She inhales cedar and hot iron and the mild sweetness of oats, then pushes herself upright, feeling yesterday like wet lace clinging to bone and choosing any way to stand. A single sheet rests on a small desk, weighted by a pencil bearing teeth marks, graphite smudged where a thumb held too tightly. She smooths the paper and shapes the careful letters she learned before speech began to float away from mouths like candle smoke. "You didn't have to, but you did." She sets the sentence where it refuses to be missed, centered and plain. Her fingers tremble afterward, not with fear but with the strangeness of putting gratitude somewhere it can be found. She folds the note once and lays it on Boone's coat, then explores the room without haste. A shelf holds a tin of salve, a spool of twine, a pewter cup, and a Bible with a cracked spine. A framed sketch of a cottonwood hangs crooked. She straightens it and finds, tucked behind the frame, a pressed sprig of blue flax, paper thin, fragile as breath on frost. She returns the keepsake, then takes in the walls, rough, honest boards, knots like eyes that watched storms without flinching. On the table sits a plate covered by a cloth. She lifts the corner, discovering a heel of bread, a wedge of cheese, 2 apples and a small folded square of paper. She opens it to find a rough map of the ranch, notations in blocky handwriting. Well, smokehouse, tack room, woodpile, chicken yard, north fence broken. At the bottom a picture of a hand open, palm up as if inviting an answer. She touches that sketch, lets her thumb rest inside the drawn palm, then eats slowly, eyes on the window. The hills beyond wear lawn shadows and sunlight like quilts stitched by a restless seamstress. A hawk cuts across the pale sky. Somewhere below the ridge, cattle drift like dark commas inside a page of tawny grass. She thinks of commas as breath marks for readers, little rests that never needed ears. When she steps outside, the day greets her with coolness. She moves from porch to yard, feeling grit press through the thin soles of borrowed slippers. The barn door stands ajar, a horse stamps tail switching. She pauses at the threshold to breathe leather, hay and animal warmth. Lila extends an open hand. She strokes the star on the mare's forehead and whispers with touch along the neck, the withers, the shoulder, a soothing litany built from patience instead of syllables. A rhythmic thudding comes from the far corral where Boone drives post. The rhythm becomes countable even without hearing: lift, set, strike, hold, lift, set, strike, hold. He raises a hand when he sees her and points toward the ridge, then mimes taking a deep breath, tapping his chest twice. He is telling her to walk as far as she wants and come back when she is ready. She nods, he nods, and she heads toward rolling grass broken by sun cups and ant hills, by patches of clover and a sinuous line of wolf willow. Each step clears another crust of humiliation from her skin. But Shane no longer leads her by the throat. A meadow lark opens its beak on a fence post, and the sunlight winks off its throat like a coin. She imagines its tune as a bright ribbon waving, and that image satisfies the part of her that once chased music. At a swell where the ranch unfolds like a map, she turns. The house sits steady, small against the country, roof shingles catching light like fish scales. In that quiet, eyes wide, lungs working, Lila realizes that yesterday's final blow did not end anything. It began something that once tending. Toward midday she returns, finds a pail by the pump, draws water and washes face and hands until dust swirls away in thin clouds that look like secrets leaving. Inside, the desk calls again. She leaves another sentence on a clean scrap: "I can help with the fence this afternoon." She copies his blocky letters so her message will meet his eye with familiar shapes. Then she sweeps, stacks wood, cleans plates and mends a torn cuff that has been folded over twice to hide its fret. When shade reaches the porch, Boone appears in the doorway, hat in hand, shirt damp at the collar, eyes searching her face without prying. He touches his chest, then points to the note, lifting his brows. She nods. He shakes his head once, gently, points at her palm, draws a line as if writing, then taps the coat where she left the earlier message. He found it. He touches his own shoulder above the heart, then lifts his thumb. He moves aside, letting her pass first. They work side by side along the north line. Lila hauls rails, sets them against the posts, while he angles nails, glances at her to time each swing with her grip. She watches his hands speak labor with a grammar that needs no school. The sun slides, the prairie hums, the wind lifts, drops. When a nail bends, he grins wryly, straightens it against a rock, and tries again. She drinks from a canteen and traces 2 letters on the side in moisture, B and C, then a small V. They finish the span before dusk, and walk home in companionable silence shaped by glances, pointing, and small smiles. In the kitchen she ladles stew from a pot he must have started earlier. He spreads a map, circles a shallow draw, sketches a pair of coyotes, then a barrier of stone. She draws a line of sun shapes at one edge, meaning daylight approach, and 3 stars on the other, meaning night watch. His eyebrows lift. He presses 2 fingers to the drawn stars like a salute. Darkness edits the land outside to outline. They light a lamp, and she writes in the notebook again, slower this time, letting the pencil rest between every few words the way a singer breathes between phrases. "You didn't have to, but you did," sits above the new line. "Gratitude can be heavy, I am learning how to carry it." She closes the notebook, places it beneath the lamp, and folds her hands around the warmth of a tin mug. He brings a blanket without asking, sets it across her knees, then points to the spare room, miming sleep. She nods but lingers by the fire until embers glow like small hearts inside black ash. Before bed, she studies the face in the mirror, a young woman with pale green eyes, jaw set like stone at a river bend, neck ringed by a locket that remembers better than she does. She will open later, on a day that belongs to stillness rather than survival. Morning returns with the coppery blush of a clean sky and a draft sliding beneath the door. She finds the desk again because hope is a habit if fed. Under the notebook lies a new paper weighted by a small horseshoe nail. It shows a cracked ear crossed out with a firm X, and beneath it, in Boone's square hand, "You hear more than most." Her throat tightens, her vision streams, every tendon in her shoulders softens as if a knotted rope finally slipped free. She grips the paper like a lifeline and weeps without noise. Not hiding, not apologizing, letting years of bite down and bear it leave through the same eyes that have carried all her listening. The room sharpens. Grain lines resolve on the floor, sparks blink inside the stove, a fly tracks a jerky path across the window and disappears. In that aftermath, emptiness does not feel like lack, it feels like cleared ground ready for planting. Boot steps pause at the threshold. Boone stands there, hat low, as if asking permission to interrupt what needed to happen without him. She turns, holds up the paper, he touches 2 fingers to the words as if swearing to them. Then he kneels, not like worship, not like apology, but like a rancher fixing himself at eye level with someone he intends to walk beside. He takes her hand between both of his warm, honest work rough, and waits. No rescue, no claim, only presence. She traces letters across his knuckles, THANKY. In the quiet that follows, time loosens. He sits back on his heels, draws a small journal from his pocket, opens to a blank page, and writes with deliberation, "Tell me what you want me to know, I will keep it true." He pushes the book toward her, offers the pencil and waits again. Words come, halting then steady: childhood at a creek bank, a winter where frost trapped breath against scarves, a mother's worry curdled to impatience, a stall door locked because a chore went unheard, a window where geese flew north, and she learned the shape of departure. Boone reads each line, then writes back, "I am here." He does not add advice, or corrections. He anchors. Evening finds them on the porch beneath a widening sky. She names constellations with a fingertip, drawing across the air. He follows, lips moving, catching the story. She signs slowly, careful that he sees hope, alive. He mirrors the shapes, fumbles one, tries again, grinning like a man who intends to practice until clumsiness becomes fluency. Inside, after the lamp is snuffed, the house holds steady. Lila lies awake a while, tracing letters across her own palm, safe now, then adds another phrase, she wants to believe, beginning here. Outside, the wind wanders the grass, and the roof creaks as if the place remembers winters past, and still chooses to stand. Sleep comes quietly as snowfall, laying a clean page over yesterday without burying it. She chooses to try. Days at the ranch soften into wordless routines. Neither Boone Caldwell nor Lila Voss needs to announce. A folded blanket waits on her chair by the fire each morning. At dusk, a tin mug of tea steams on the table, leaving ghosts on the window. Boots stand brushed and paired. The broom leans where her hand expects. A kerchief rests by the basin like a greeting. Work fills daylight, yet gestures stitch the hours until habit becomes language. His hat lifted as she passes, her palm on his sleeve to mean I see, a loaf wrapped in cloth cooling for whoever returns last. Some evenings she lights the lamp and he lowers the wick so the chimney stays clear. Some mornings he chalks a mark for what needs restocking and she slides it toward done. They grow fluent in glances that ask and nods that grant. One windless afternoon, Boone brings a parcel bound in twine, brown paper stamped by a Cheyenne bookseller. He sets it down and tilts his head as though showing a fine calf. Lila opens a blue cloth-bound volume, American Manual Alphabet and Sign. Letters on the spine look stern, inside hands blossom into meaning. He touches his chest, points to the book, taps his temple asking for lessons. She laughs without sound, clears the table and they draw their chairs together while the fire warms the room. She turns to the alphabet and spells her name slowly, Lila. He studies each curve, then copies. At first his fingers tangle, knuckles stubborn from years with reins and hammers. Patience keeps time. She steadies joints with featherlight taps. And when he succeeds, she touches the back of his hand in approval. He spells Boone, pausing at the double letter like a river crossing. She shows the motion again until confidence lands. By the time the lamp shrinks, he can spell both names, slow but sure, and a wall inside her thins to a door. Days that follow carry practice wherever work allows. While he hoists a saddle she signs water. He nods toward the bucket. While she mends a hem, he finger spells bread. She points to the oven with a grin. He learns yes, no, wait, careful, enough, and the quick shape for coyote when dark bodies flicker along the gulch at twilight. She teaches thank you from chin to air. He returns the motion with a wink that admits clumsiness and resolve. The house adapts. A slate hangs by the stove for lists and little jokes. He sketches a horse with a scandalous tail. She draws a hat too large for any head. Laughter travels as movement, shoulders tilting, eyes bright. At noon on a rainy day he finds her writing on the fogged window and copies shapes until the glass clears. After chores they add words: time, place, wind, hunger and home. He asks how to say safe, she shows hands shaping shelter. He holds the sign longer than the page suggests, as if promising to be the roof itself. Sometimes she braids signs with penciled notes to tell small stories: a winter stream fixed in glass, a fox stepping light, a crack chasing its tail, pause finding shore. He listens with every muscle and writes in the margin: fox knows the way. On a night blown raw by northern wind, they carry quilts to the porch because stars insist on being counted. She signs how as a child, she missed her mother's call and was shut in a stall where horses breathed hot and hay scratched her throat. Hands describe walls: a bolt sliding, a plank pressed to her spine, hours measured by a thin bar of light. Boone's jaw flexes. He writes in the journal he keeps for evenings: you don't need ears to hear the truth. He offers his hand and waits until she places hers in it, fingers resting like reins, slack on a trusted trail. Another layer gives way. He leaves the journal where she can answer when she wants. She fills a page about agates in a creek bed, how stones feel after river work, smoothed, not erased. He nods and writes back: same for people, work continues, fences need mending, calves bawl, leather splits, storms threat. He oils her gloves so seams will not blister. She stitches a lining into his coat to block the wind. When a hawk lands on the cottonwood, he signs bird, awkward. She answers with the sleeker hawk, and he repeats until the difference sticks. One evening they learn numbers, turning fingers into counts for nails, boards, cattle, minutes and miles. He invents a sign for coffee that looks like a dancing pot. She snorts, shows the standard, and he vows to use both, depending on mood. As spring climbs they take the book outside after supper and sit on the porch steps. Shadows lengthen, barn swallows flicker under the eaves, and garden beds wait for planting. He asks about the locket by touching the air near it and raising his brow. She opens the clasp and shows a miniature girl in a blue dress, hair pinned too tight, eyes uncertain. She signs past, then now and here, pressing her palm to her chest like a claim. He mirrors the sequence with care. They push beyond nouns. She teaches want, choose, promise, and I will try. He adds a humble sign for mistake, tapping his knuckle. She gives the actual shape, smiling when he adopts it. Evenings shrink to embers. A cricket sometimes hops near the doorstep. He carries it to the ground. Other nights a purple cloud bank lifts above the butts. They count heartbeats between flash and darkness, because she cannot track thunder, turning light into a drum. Before sleep, they trade a final exchange. He signs her name with sure lines, touches two fingers to his heart, and opens his palm. She traces Boone across the air and sets her hand over his. No vow is spoken, yet a compact thickens like sap becoming amber around a leaf, preserving what matters while it glows. Once she wakes from a bad dream, he comes with a beam set true and she leans into the space he offers until the rush passes. Next morning he slides a sketch across the table, two hands cupped around a small flame. She touches the drawn fire, then signs together, shelter. Later they sit on the porch and watch the west fade to silver. She gathers fragments into a braid, a stall, a first understanding that sound would never stay, shame trying to root in marrow, patience replacing songs, the skill of reading tracks others miss, mouths shoulders, hands that forget to hide. He listens as if to a river under eye. When she finishes, he writes again: you don't need ears to hear the truth. He sets the journal aside and offers both hands. She lays hers over his and there in the frontier dark, beneath a sky that will not empty, they hold on because they choose to, not because storm or law or gossip demands. If this quiet bond of recognition touches your heart, continue to witness their unspoken connection grow. Market Square leans toward noon, loud with barter and bright with dust turned gold by the sun. Canvas awnings snap, apples shine in pyramids. A tinsmith taps, a butcher's blade flashes, bread steams on boards. Children chase hoops through barrel lanes while two dogs nose crumbs near the baker. Lila Voss walks beside Boone Caldwell, gloved fingers grazing his sleeve. She reads faces like tracks, lifted chins, narrowed eyes, lips curled for jokes that cost nothing but someone else's dignity. A bell claps at the depot. Flour drifts across light like breath on glass. Whispers move ahead of them, thin as reeds and settle when they stop at the well. Boone signs water, And Lila nods, lowering the bucket hand over hand. The rope bites. The wheel clicks. Cool spray freckles her wrist. Then Harlan steps from the feed store shade. Hat pitched, boots glassy with polish, smile tight as a cinch. Two clerks trail him like obedient spurs. His gaze slides over Boone and fixes on Lila with a measuring calm that hunts for purchase. His voice rides the storefronts, the rancher and his charity case. Sounds thin. A boy stills his hoop. A peddler's scale swings without weight. Boone steps half a pace closer to Lila so any thrown word hits his coat first. He answers without heat, tone firm as posts set true. You laughed because she's quiet. But she's the only one who listened. The square notices listening given a body. Lila feels yesterday's cold creep and then crack. She steps into the circle of light by the well and lifts her hand. She signs with clean intent, every movement cutting room for breath. I may not hear your insults, but I see who you are. I stand whole in spite of your hatred. Her eyes make the statement complete. A silence like paper held to flame runs through the lane. Harlan's laugh strikes once, brittle as chipped crockery. See? Theater, he says to the air. The rancher wants applause. The girl wants pity. Lila lowers her chin, not in retreat, but focus, and signs a sequence anyone can understand. A stall, a sliding bolt, straw pricking skin, a sliver of light, hours counted by breath. The blacksmith swallows. The baker's wife touches her quiet child's hair. Pain, shown without sound, walks the boards and asks the town to stand straighter. Boone borrows a merchant's slate and writes one word high and plain. Respect. He sets it on a barrel like a rule of measure. A gust flutters newsprint. A girl snatches the sheet and clutches it as if truth might blow away again. Harlan lifts a hand as if conducting a hymn no one knows. Respect? For what? She cannot answer a simple call. Lila touches her locket and breathes once more. She signs memory made into a lesson. A door shut. A name taken. A crowd choosing sport over mercy. A vow to stand anyway. The sheriff does not speak, which tells its own story. Boone closes the space between men to a palm's width and keeps his voice low. You learned to speak early and mistook volume for worth. Harlan sneers. You barged into a church like a dime novel hero. I couldn't stand still while men like you spent laughter as coin. Boone replies. The clerks trade uneasy glances. An old soldier on a bench lifts two fingers in Lila's direction. A spare salute. Leave, Harlan snaps. Take your show elsewhere. Lila turns so the crowd forms a half circle, a stage made of dust and boards. She signs 4 ideas and points to the town. Work, pay, teach, and build. Then she kneels to the quiet boy and offers her palm. He shapes thank you. The sign fits like a found key. Murmurs shift tone. Boone adds a second word to the slate. Witness. He holds it to the light until the board gleams and the square reads both words. Harlan tries one more angle. Trickery, he says. She flatters you to steal a better name. Lila plants her hand on the well's stone rim, simple as laying claim, then signs a vow with palms opening from her chest. A cooper's apprentice whispers to his master. The master nods as if to say, we need more than barrels to carry grain. Now we need vessels for meaning. Harlan steps close, lifts his hand toward Boone's coat, then lets it fall. He pitches his voice to merchant. If she stays, I'll take my business elsewhere. The blacksmith studies iron as if iron could answer, then says, suit yourself. The baker watches the boy mirror thank you again, and looks away from Harlan. A cloud drifts. Shade cools tempers. A horse tosses foam, then calm. Lila moves shoulder to shoulder with Boone and signs one line fierce and steady. I stand whole. She lets the town see that wholeness is not a mask over bruise, but the bone-deep habit of standing. Boone lifts her fingers to feel his breath, their quiet signal of accord, and releases them with a nod. The market restarts in a different key. A merchant calls prices without bite. The mayor's wife holds up a blanket banded in earth and river, then lowers the price with a small shake of refusal, as if to say the stitches carry a debt. Harlan watches as the measure slips from his hand. You'll regret tying your fortunes to a mouth that cannot answer, he says, but the line lands dull. Lila scratches a circle in dust with her shoe and stands inside it. She signs the future and draws a path of work. Garden rows, a school of hands, a harvest dance where rhythm rides feet and faces. Boone speaks for the first time since the slate. We'll be here, paying fare, mending fences, teaching any neighbor who wants a place at the table. The ring of onlookers loosens into neighbors. Harlan yields a step, and then another, tugged backward by a tide he failed to read. His stare meets Lila's. Whatever he prepared dies before the air. He slips into the feed store's shadow. Light sharpens the square as if scrubbed. A drummer tests a snare for the evening dance. Lila reads the rhythm in his wrists and smiles. She signs to Boone Flower. He signs back together. They place coins on the counter and lift a sack that smells of prairie wheat and future loaf. A boy runs to hold the alley gate. Lila squeezes his shoulder, blessing rerouted through touch. Boone looks once over his shoulder, not for pursuit but acknowledgement of inches gained that will become miles. Lila breathes deep and unafraid. The street ahead flares with afternoon. The path home waits like a page with room for new letters. If Lila's defiant stand inspires you, read on to see how silence becomes strength. Behind them the sheriff tips his brim. The tinsmith wipes his hands and sets aside a small bell as a gift for the school to come. And the quiet boy practices thank you until memory settles. A banner lifts fall, not a triumphal march, a beginning measured by breath, by hands learning words, by neighbors choosing to look and then to see. Together, Frost sketches window corners at dawn, then lifts the air tastes of apples, wood smoke and chaff. On such a morning, a quiet knock meets the door. Boone opens to a woman in a darned shawl and a boy of 7 standing half behind her skirts. The child watches Lila, not Boone, with a steady, curious gaze. Fingers hover near his chest, as if words want shape. The mother lowers her eyes and mouths a greeting, then pulls a folded note from her pocket and holds it toward the room. Lila reads the penciled lines. We saw you in the square. My son cannot speak. Can you teach him what your hands know? She looks to Boone. He tips his hat, then points toward the cottonwood where shade spills like cloth over grass. By afternoon a bench appears beneath those branches, hewn from a split plank set on block legs. Boone sands the edges smooth and rubs oil into the grain until the wood drinks and gleams. Lila brings the blue alphabet book and a slate, sets both on her lap, and smiles to the boy without forcing sound or pity. He edges forward. The mother sits a little distance away with knitting held but not moving. Lila lifts her hands and shapes a with a patient arc. Then the boy imitates his fingers tangle. She steadies a stubborn knuckle and nods when the letter lands. They work through Eli, and another L until his name Eli sits between them like a candle newly lit. He beams, presses his palms together with solemn delight and looks to his mother, who presses her lips to keep from weeping. Boone lingers nearby, mending a bridle, pretending not to listen while listening to everything that breath can tell. When lesson time ends, Lila taps the bench, then signs tomorrow with a small circle by her cheek. The mother touches her heart, then names a time with 2 raised fingers. Gratitude needs no dictionary. 2 days later, a pair of cousins comes, one lively and one shy, with a father who carries a lunch pail and a face unsure how to ask for help. An older couple brings a grandson who stares at the sky as if it carries secrets only he hears. Boone builds a second bench, then a third, sets posts for a simple awning, strings a line for lanterns, and plans a board for a low table where slats can rest. He paints a small sign. Hands. Children trace letters in dust while Lila shows shapes for yes, no, please, thank you, safe, home, bread, river, coyote and dance. Mothers practice at the edge, surprised at how meaning travels faster when arms help the mouth. A storekeeper's wife brings a crock of cider. The blacksmith's apprentice contributes charcoal sticks. The pastor leaves a basket of pears and a note that says simply for light. The valley shifts along with the weather. Afternoons grow short. Pumpkins and braids of onions crowd porches. Wagons haul shocks to the threshing ground. Talk of the harvest festival gains a drumbeat quality, a pulse moving through kitchens and sheds. Lila lays out simple lessons that end with games where vocabulary turns into story. Eli shows coyote with sly pride and then adds jump with a delighted hop. Laughter ripples without sting. Boone watches from the fence, carving a small whistle for a girl who never keeps still, and nods when she fingerspells thanks with perfect care. Neighbors who once measured worth by shouting now lift palms in greeting. Lila's fear loosens thread by thread until the knot becomes something she can hold without cutting the skin. On the last evening before the fair, a wind cloud scrubs the sky clean and hangs a silver sliver of moon over the cottonwood. Boone sets lanterns along the path, warm circles that teach feet where to fall. He finds Lila writing in the journal and waits until she looks up. She signs hope, steady, then makes a question with lifted brows, ready. He answers with both hands forming a shelter around an invisible flame, and she smiles because that is exactly what tomorrow needs. Festival morning arrives crisp, banners ripple, a fiddler tunes while teams of horses clatter through the gate, dragging wagons piled high. Booths line the square with pies, preserves, quilts and coils of rope. Women pin ribbons to prize pumpkins. A baker unveils a ginger cake dusted with sugar like first snow. The smell of roasted meat wafts through the air. Children cluster around a barrel where apples bob. A pair of veterans polish tin stars with sleeves and talk in the shorthand of men who have been to the same dark river. Lila and Boone arrive with the hands school slates wrapped in a blanket and a basket of biscuits. Eli trots at their side, carrying the blue book as if he guards a treasure. The mayor, a compact man with a lapel flower and a manner that usually tries too hard, clears his throat on the platform and announces a new tradition. He invites Lila to speak. Her chest tightens. A winter room returns. Boone squeezes her hand, then releases it slowly, leaving courage where contact had been. She steps up and raises her palms so the crowd sees attention itself become a ceremony. Fingers tell the story. She shows a child shut behind wood because sound refused to stay. She shows a girl learning to read rivers and shoulders. She shows hands building bridges where mouths failed. She signs that silence is not emptiness. It is a language that refuses to waste what it has. She signs that listening can happen with eyes, skin and spine, that neighbors become kin by choosing to see. Boone stands at the edge of the platform and translates in a voice that does not grandstand. He gives words only shape, not decoration, matching her meaning beat for beat until people lean forward without noticing the leaning. A hush settles the way snow does, and then a warmth rises like bread. She ends with a vow, palms opening. We will teach anyone who asks. He echoes the vow for ears that need sound to store purpose. For a heartbeat silence holds. Then applause erupts, not the sharp kind that tries to win but the rolling generous kind that gathers and carries. Eli claps with open joy, then signs again and again thank you, while his mother laughs and cries into her shawl. The mayor bows in a way that almost looks humble and presents a ribbon that says community service. Lila takes it, then pins it to the cottonwood sign later so the bench wears the honor instead of any single person. Boone buys cider for every student and a sack of flour for the widow who keeps bringing extra cups. Merchants quietly set aside coins for a larger awning before winter. Near sundown, the fiddler calls for a simple line dance. A child who usually hides behind a barrel stands at the edge and tries the step with both hands lifted like wings. Light softens. Lanterns answer the deepening blue. The town breathes together. Later, back beneath the cottonwood, Lila smooths the bench with her sleeve and sits beside Boone. He writes one sentence on the slate. A valley is learning to listen. She touches the words then tucks the slate under the awning so dew will not erase them. The air smells of straw and hot iron and cinnamon carried from someone's kitchen. Eli runs up with a ribbon fragment and asks by signs if the school will meet tomorrow. Lila answers yes, then adds always, shaping the promise with care. They watch families drift home over rutted lanes, lanterns bobbing like small constellations. Harlan lingers at the far end of the square, unreadable, then turns away without speaking. It does not matter, change has joined, and it will not be bargained back. If this transformation from isolation to inspiration moves you, stay with the story to feel the full power of change. Spring melts from the grass edges first, then from rails, then from the last shaded hollow, and the valley exhales. Lila Voss and Boone Caldwell move their lives into a smaller house that waits on a gentle knoll, its wide windows open to pasture, its porch broad enough for 2 chairs and a narrow table where a journal can rest. The door closes with a calm latch, not a shout. They bring quilts, the blue alphabet book, Boone's tools, her locket, a tin of seed, a kettle that has learned every stove, and a slate that children traced all winter. Inside, Sunlight pours across clean boards, and stops at a braided rug rescued from the old place. On moving day they say little, working in step, trading nods that mean lift, ease, set, breathe. Lila places cups by the window and lines jars like sentries along one shelf. Boone hangs a hammer, a draw knife, and a saw where his hand will find them in the dark. By evening they sit on the porch while thawed water tinkles down the gully and birds test the new air. She lifts her hands and signs hope. Alive. He nods, smiling faintly. A private sunrise. Morning brings tasks that feel like planting stakes in fresh ground. They clear scrub from a patch south of the porch, roll rocks to the fence, rake out roots, and square corners as if drawing a map for patience. Boone breaks soil with steady strokes, turns the earth until it loosens from clods into crumbs that lie ready to hold a season. Lila shakes a seed into her palm and studies each small promise the way she once studied mouths. Attentive to shape, silent about fear. Peas go first, then carrots, onions and beets. She presses beans beneath a thumbprint and smooths the furrow close. He sets hoops, stretches muslin and ties knots he trusts. Over days they add squash hills, potato trenches, a row for herbs, and an arc for sunflowers that will guard the edge like cheerful sentinels. After work they wash at the pump, steam lifting from wrists in the cool. Inside he writes the date on a fresh page, noting rows with tidy marks. She adds sketches of leaves so his record will keep more than numbers. Rain drifts in from the west, fine as sifted flour, and the roof answers with a calm patter. They read by the stove until the lamplight grows buttery and the kettle begins to murmur. He writes her stories in that journal, becoming her scribe without a ceremony, preserving her voice unfiltered. He writes exactly what her hands tell, no polish she did not ask for, no sermon he preferred. She tells of a creek where agates live under cold water, and he writes creek, agates, cold, then the image she draws with fingers, and he adds a note about the color so memory will not fade. She tells of a train she watched without hearing, its smoke a long ribbon unspooling over hills like breath. He writes breath where others might write noise. She tells of a night when shame rose like flood water, then receded when someone traced safe now on a trembling palm. He writes the phrase and leaves it uncrowded by commentary. Pages fill, between entries they plant more. She tucks marigolds near tomatoes to ask beetles to dine elsewhere. He builds a fence to keep deer out. They stretch twine for vines, mark beds with little cedar stakes, and label each with chalked letters that will rinse away after they learn their shapes by heart. Wind travels through young leaves and makes a sound she cannot catch, yet the sight of it pleases her like good bread. Days ripple into a rhythm that feels earned rather than imposed. In the mornings he rides the north fence and returns with news of tracks, loose wire and a fox den he will not disturb. She wears a hat whose brim throws shade across her pale eyes and neck, then carries a basket of stones to the border and builds a low wall that looks like a quiet sentence. At noon they eat on the porch. He slices apples, she spreads cheese. A wasp considers and then drifts away. He reads yesterday's lines aloud with his finger, not his voice, so she can follow exactly what she gave. She corrects a flourish with a grin, and he strikes it with one neat stroke. Afternoons bring gentle labor. She prunes roses, lays mulch and sets shallow dishes for birds. He cuts boards for a small shed, teaches a careful apprentice named Patience how to answer a square. Toward dusk they walk the rows, inspecting sprouted tongues and counting victory. She signs alive, alive to seedlings as if blessing. Later she sits with the journal while embers glow like low stars behind the grate, and tells a memory she had avoided. A winter afternoon when a door closed and wool held tears she could not name. A sky so brittle it seemed a bell ready to crack. A mare pressing her warm breath against cold fingers under the stall rail. He records the images and stops his pencil where her hands stop, giving pain its border but not its throne. During the second week, shoots thicken. Rain keeps faith. Bees find the orchard. A thrush sets up in the willow over the creek. They build a rain barrel, cut channels so runoff will serve the roots rather than wash them away, and bury ash from the stove around the squash hills. She makes a scarecrow out of an old shirt that once belonged to a cruel season, and laughs when the wind gives it a friendly bow. He reads the weather with nostrils and joints, then stakes peas a little higher because he believes in gusts. At night stars spill like wheat from a lifted sack. From the porch they chart paths between bright grains and give each line a name. She sighs in hope, alive again, and he nods with that faint smile that belongs to him alone, the one that says yes without seizing victory. He writes about the garden as if it were a chorus speaking in green, about hands dirtied into prayer, about rest earned by bone. He writes her sayings as she gives them, compact as seed yet full. She reads the pages later, tracing each line, learning how her own voice looks when another hand carries it. On Sunday he moves the chairs so the sun warms their backs, and she opens the locket for the first time since winter. Inside sits a face made years ago, a girl both hers and not. She sets it on the table, signs now here, and closes it gently. He does not ask for the rest. Their house learns them. The porch remembers where mugs prefer to stand. The windows learn which sash sticks and which glides. The garden teaches patience every hour. Sometimes failure visits in small useful ways. A cut worm chews a seedling. A row tilts. A vine snaps. They adjust stakes. Add collars. Water at dawn and do not scold the wind. Every correction goes into the journal beside victories, because an honest record keeps pride from lying. When a stray dog pads up with ribs like cord, Lila kneels with a bowl and strokes a tawny ear until wary eyes soften. Boone builds a low shelter and writes stray friend on a scrap tacked inside, a joke that feels like truth. Days pass, greens lift in waves then level, onions push feather, beans grab the twine and climb like children, let loose. She learns the scent of tomato plants sharp and hopeful, and rubs it into her wrists like a tonic. He learns to sign harvest words and kitchen verbs. She teaches simmer, stir, taste, share. He practices until each lands clean. They host neighbors for a simple supper on the porch, setting bowls of early peas in bread, passing butter, trading stories that fit inside smiles. No one performs, everyone joins. After the dishes are stacked, they sit again and watch fireflies test their lanterns. He writes by their glimmer. She lays her head on his shoulder and closes her eyes without fear. The journal grows heavier. Margins hold notes about which seeds sprouted strongest, which rows lagged, and which chores need a new order. It becomes a map of seasons and a ledger of the heart. On a windless night he sets the book in her hands and signs yours, then taps his chest, scribe. She holds it to her like bread warm from the oven. Later she writes a page alone, telling the garden what it is teaching. Quiet labor bends grief into growth. He reads the entry with his finger along the line, the way he always does, and looks at her as if dawn had arrived early. Spring keeps whispering through long grass and plum blossoms. Frost returns once, almost in mischief, then retreats under canvas and They wake before the sun and find the porch silvered, then watch brightness pour across the boards until the sheen lifts and warmth stays. She signs hope, alive, and he nods, smiling faintly, and sets down new words that carry exactly what she meant, no more, no less. So the record will stand when memory blurs and harvest waits beyond summer like a promise kept in good soil. When evening returns, porch boards hold their warmth and the creek slips past like a low ribbon of light, and they sit close without urgency, reading the garden with their fingers. She sighs in hope, alive once more, and he nods with that soft grin that belongs only to quiet victory. Then he writes carefully as planting, another line in her book, and the house seems to breathe, keeping faith with every tender word for tomorrow. Evening gathers like a soft shawl over the garden that Lila Voss and Boone Caldwell raised from patient furrows, and the rows hold their green like sentences finished at last. Bees idle over squash blossoms, onions lift flags, and the cottonwood beyond the fence combs the sky with its crown. And near its shade Boone pauses, breath steady, hat tucked beneath his arm as if clearing space for truth. Lila kneels among beans, tying a wayward vine, fingers stained with earth and the day's small victories. He watches the motion, notes the quiet confidence, and steps onto the path between beds until crumbs of soil whisper under his boots. She straightens, wipes her palms on her skirt, and looks at him with the steady attention that has carried them from winter's wait to this gentle hour. He lowers to one knee on the soft ground, draws a silver ring from a small leather pouch, and lifts his hands so she can read the shapes. He signs, not for duty, for love, each word formed with care, then speaks, low and certain, I just want to see us. The simple sentence lands like rain after dust. Her breath lifts, her eyes brim, and she nods tearfully, accepting fully the gift he offers without demand. The garden seems to inhale with her. A breeze runs its palm across pea tendrils, skylarks cross the last light, and the house on the knoll glows as if listening. Boone holds still so she can claim the moment at her pace. Lila touches the ring, traces its plain circle, then sets her left hand into his open palm. He slips the band onto her finger. Metal catches the sun, a bright promise nested above soil-dark skin. She tips his chin up with two gentle fingers, maps his cheek with her thumb and smiles in a way that says beginning more than any word. He rises, draws her close, and rests his forehead against hers while onions nod and a quiet dog rolls onto its back in the time. They stand like that until the first star appears. Later on the porch, they write the date in the journal that saves her voice as it is given, not as anyone might reshape it. Boone prints, "Proposal in the garden," then writes the exact phrase she signed and the exact words he spoke. Lila adds a tiny drawing of a ring above two leaves, and beneath it a line that reads, "Choice answered with choice." Morning brings the bee hum and the smell of damp ground. Muse moves on quiet feet. By noon neighbors arrive with shy congratulations, as if joy ought to be handled like a chick. Eli brings a paper crown he cut with earnest care. The blacksmith's apprentice offers a nail shaped into a heart. The mayor's wife asks whether there will be a ceremony. Boone glances at Lila, her eyes turn toward the cottonwood. He nods. Word spread. By late afternoon, hands raise a simple archway from saplings and twine. Children string river stones on jute and hang them where they will chime against each other when the wind wanders through the meadow. Boone plans a narrow table for bread and salt. Lila sets jars for wildflowers and instructs Eli by signs and a grin to place them where light will catch. No one orders. Still, everything falls into place. Dusk pours honey through branches. Friends gather under the cottonwood, not to witness a spectacle but to stand near a vow already lived. Women tie ribbons to low limbs, men set lanterns along the path. Children practice walking in pairs without stepping on hem. A fiddler tunes near the fence, and then mutes his strings. Tonight asks for tempo carried by hearts, not bow. Boone arrives in a clean shirt and the vest Lila mended. She comes through the garden in a simple dress with a sprig of rosemary at the waist, and the silver locket resting just above the ring that now shines on her hand. No spoken vows begin, but lived ones already hum. Months of bread shared, fences mended, lessons given, pages written, grief named and set down without shame. Boone takes her hands, palms warm, and signs again. Not for duty, for love. She answers, for love, and then signs, "I choose you." Here, he does not translate, no one needs him to. Their friends read the exchange like weather. A child releases a breath she didn't know she was holding. The mayor, for once, finds silence fitting. Eli steps forward with a small hoop woven from willow. Boone lifts it, places it over Lila's wrist with playful reverence, then cups her fingers so the silver band can be seen by the circle. He says, "For the sake of those who lean upon sound, I just want to see ya." The words fall softly as leaves on water. Lila touches his face, one palm on his cheekbone, the other at his jaw, a seal learned in a world where hearing fails but meaning will not retreat. He bows his head and kisses her forehead, a promise written without ink. The crowd answers not with clatter but with that rolling warmth from the harvest fair, alive again yet deeper. The fiddler lets one gentle phrase slip free and then rests, because stillness plays best tonight. Between lantern pools, neighbors speak of plantings foals, letters learned and winter repaired by kindness. Boone retrieves the journal, opens to a fresh page, and writes second wedding under a cottonwood tree, then pauses and slides the pencil to Lila. She draws the tree, the two chairs on the porch, a ring, a loaf, hands joined, and a path into darkness marked by lanterns. Beneath she writes, "No spoken vows but lived ones." He underlines lived once, lightly, and smiles when she lifts a brow and underlines it again firmer. They look up. The cottonwood shivers, coins of leaves turning. Boone moves among friends and thanks each with a clasp that lingers a beat longer than custom. Lila shows Eli a new sign for joy that flickers like those fireflies. He shows her his, a proud invention, and everyone present decides both can live in the same language. When lanterns burn low, people drift down the path in twos and threes, talking softly as if words could bruise the dark. The bench remains. The jars shine with leftover glow and crumbs wait for birds who will arrive at first light. Boone and Lila stay beneath the branches. He lifts her left hand and kisses the knuckle above the ring. She presses her forehead to his and breathes until their chests find the same slow tide. They cross the meadow arm in arm, passing rows that now feel like a blessing written in green ink. On the porch they sit for a while, not ready to step inside, letting the night close around them like a door that guards rather than divides. He writes one last line before sleep. "Our love sealed in quiet." She nods, sets the journal on the table so the pages will dry open, and leans her head on his shoulder. When they rise they step through the doorway not as people braced against scorn but as partners holding a season that already carries fruit. Her palm finds his chest, his hand finds the back of her neck, and together they draw a breath that tastes of time, wood smoke and tomorrow. Friends circle close but leave a meadow of space, so the couple's hands can speak without crowding, and children stand on tiptoe to watch the shapes that carry meaning across the air like swallows crossing the creek. Neighbors bring simple gifts that will last longer than applause. Seed packets saved from last year's best rows, a coil of rope for gates, a bar of soap scented with lye and lavender, a bundle of willow cuttings for the far fence where spring water lingers. A veteran sets a small flag in the earth near the path, and nods toward Boone as if to say that keeping faith can look like mending wire and telling the truth. The mayor forgoes a speech, and instead lifts a lantern so light falls across Lila's face while she signs gratitude. When the first stars steady above the cottonwood, everyone sees what has been true for months. This union holds because work, mercy and choice hold it. Founders' Day arrives with grass brushed bright and a sky rinsed clear. The meadow beyond Sagebrush Hollow, opening like a wide palm ready to hold every neighbor. Blankets spread across clover, while baskets breathe cinnamon, pepper, apple, and smoked beef. Girls braid crowns from yarrow, lupine, and sunflower stalks, pinning them to their hair with twine as boys chase one another around a pole strung with ribbons dyed from berry mash. Drums thump slow practice beats near a platform of planks raised beside the cottonwood whose leaves flicker like coins. Merchants lay quilts, jars of preserves, and wheels of cheese under awnings. Eli holds the blue book like a talisman and grins whenever Lila Voss lifts a hand. Boone Caldwell checks lantern hooks, tests knots, and speaks with the fiddler who will keep time without drowning movement. He feels the day's purpose in his ribs the way riders feel horses settle before a good run. He meets Lila's gaze across sunlight and dust, and the world quiets. She touches her locket, then signs ready. He answers with shelter, flame, together. A banner painted by children ripples along a rope between stakes. Founders' Day, letters charmingly uneven. Dogs nap beneath benches. New mothers rock infants while veterans trade gentle stories that avoid the heaviest river. When the mayor steps forward, the crowd forms a half circle. He raises a hand toward Lila and the students who have practiced for weeks beneath the cottonwood. Lila arranges the group in arc. Some kids speak, others do not. All know the sequence. Faces turn luminous with focus. Music begins as a soft pulse tapped on a drum rim, then lifts into a fiddle line barely above breath. Lila steps into the first pattern, hands opening an invitation. Small palms mirror her, shoulders relax, feet shape a sway that gathers everyone. Movements braid fear into something carried instead of hidden. The story dances forward. A child mimes a door, another shows a bolt sliding. Lila answers with palms, insisting on hope. Eli traces the river, then the bridge, while his cousin marks the path. A girl who once froze in crowds draws courage across the air like a bow. People watch in rapt stillness, reading sentences written by arms, wrists, eyes, faces, breath. Nobody needs translation because meaning rides the body. Midway through, the rhythm broadens. Families who earlier only looked now lean. Grandparents thread flowers through hats. The baker's quiet son steps onto the planks and signs thank you toward the town, then points to Lila with joy so clear that several onlookers wipe their eyes. Boone stands just off stage, the journal tucked beneath his arm, willing the space to remain gentle. He sees Harlan at the rear, hat low, jaw set, a man who once spent laughter like coin now counting something else. Lila leads the second figure. Children weave between adults, trading places like birds lifting and settling. Hands describe sowing, watering, patience and harvest. Faces move from guarded to bright. Those who live by sound hear little more than wood creak, drum tap, shoe scrape. Yet meaning arrives through sight, through muscles, through the shared hush growing. When a town remembers kindness costs less than scorn. She reaches the final shape, everyone freezes, so attention gathers. Lila signs the final stanza. Even if the world never hears me, I will still speak. Boone gives the spoken echo softly for those who need it, and the field seems to inhale. For one suspended breath, silence becomes a cathedral. Then applause roars. Lila feels the vibration, a surge like a river through rock, a living thunder. She reads in chests, hat brims, shoulders, open mouths, rising dust. Children laugh, either aloud or in motion. Ribbons snap in the breeze, flower crowns tilt, hats lift, cane tips thump, boots stamp, cheeks shine. The soundless side of joy answers in movement so whole it needs nothing added. Harlan watches, lowers his head in recognition. He does not leave triumph or shame, he simply accepts that something true no longer bends to him. A clerk beside him lowers a ledger, and looks toward the students with a wet shine that needs no defense. A path begins beneath boots that once stamped derision. Boone crosses to Lila and wraps her in a steady embrace, careful of the students still bowing. Into her hair, he whispers, "You changed them." She presses her cheek to his shoulder and nods, not claiming victory so much as recognizing a door has swung wide. The mayor wipes his sleeve and gestures for Lila to step forward. Instead, she beckons the children. They stand with her hands linked, a living garland under the cottonwood. The sheriff steps near, awkwardly removes his hat, and the blacksmith lifts the bell so its gentle tone rides the air again. Merchants bring fruit for families who journeyed far. A ranch hand signs clumsy gratitude. Lila answers with patience that turns clumsy into brave. Eli's mother embraces her son, then Lila, then Boone. Unable to choose order, the square's old cruelties seem smaller than the afternoon. Boone invites everyone to share bread. Tables fill. People who had never tried to sign practice simple phrases with neighbors. Laughter moves kindly, careful not to bruise. Lila walks along the line, greeting households by name, offering a warm welcome. She feels the bench beneath the cottonwood still holding warmth from weeks of lessons and imagines winter gatherings held by lamplight, where pages turn, pencils scratch and a valley keeps learning. She returns to Boone. He opens the journal and writes in his square, faithful hand, Founders Day dance, meaning carried by hands, faces, breath. She adds a sketch of circles within circles, then a cottonwood leaf, then a tiny bell. He writes the town listen. She signs yes, then touches his wrist, the gesture saying stay. They sit on the grass while dusk lowers a velvet canopy over lanterns. A breeze tugs flower crowns, fireflies ignite. The fiddler risks a soft tune that threads through families packing quilt. The mayor's wife sets a basket of buns beside the bench and mouths thank you before walking away with her daughter, who is already practicing more work. A veteran who had avoided noise for years lingers, watching the students rehearse a playful coda, then salutes Lila with 2 fingers, as if honoring a commander who won without cannon. Night gathers. Boone carries the last lantern to the path toward home. Lila trails him, then turns back once to see the meadows settling. She reads shadows like sentences, every blanket, ribbon, jar and shoe print joining a record of what took root. The cottonwood stands sentinel, coins whispering. They reach the porch. He sets the lamp beside the journal. She lifts her palms and signs hope, alive. He answers with the same shape he learned in winter and never set down. They sit without rush, listening with eyes to moths, batting the chimney, to the creek's thread of moonlight, to the dogs sighing at their feet. Lila rests her head on Boone's shoulder, then writes one last line. Today, being seen became ordinary. He underlines today, she underlines ordinary. They smile in the dark, because quiet triumph needs no purpose. If this triumphant moment of being seen resonates deeply, keep turning the pages for the heartfelt conclusion. On the grassy ridge at twilight, sagebrush hollow shimmers below like a scattered necklace, lanterns pricking blue dusk, while laughter and porch talk ripple along wagon ruts. And the old cottonwood crowns the meadow as if blessing every lesson learned this year. Lila Voss stands with Boone Caldwell where the wind tastes of cinnamon, pine and cooling iron. 2 silhouettes above a town that once stared and now looks with understanding. Children spin ribbons near the benches. Women fold quilts. Men coil ropes. Neighbors trade jars and news without sharpness. Up here, quiet holds like bedrock. Boone kneels, opens the journal and writes in square strokes that never overreach. She was born without sound but she taught a whole town how to listen. He turns the page so the words face the valley. Lantern light catches the ink. Lila's smile answers with calm pride. A promise kept to the girl who once flinched when doors closed. The dog circles twice and settles. Pea vines darken. Smoke climbs in unhurried threads. Stars lift one by one over the buttes. Lila touches his wrist. Seal of assent. Boone taps the margin as if planting a seed. Below, Eli teaches his cousin thank you. The baker hands out slices to children who helped. The sheriff, hat in hand, lingers near the cottonwood with the look of a man who finally understands what protection means. A breeze combs the grass, and the ridge keeps faith with both memory and tomorrow. Thank you for staying with Lila's journey, Boone says for listeners who need voice and writes for readers still on the trail. If her silence spoke louder than voices, if her courage showed love needs no sound, hit that hype button. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of resilience, romance and redemption in the untamed frontier. In the wild, love doesn't shout, it waits to be listened to. See you next, partner. Lila nods, then signs one more line that Boone records without polish. Come back with open eyes, ready hands and hearts that practice mercy. They stand together and watch the town tilt from celebration toward rest. Window squares glow, a horse nickers, a gate clicks, a prayer drifts. The weave holds. She thinks of the church where scorn tried to set her fate, the square where she stood whole, the cottonwood where vows needed only deeds, the meadow where children danced fear into joy. He remembers tracing safe now on her glove, the blue alphabet book opened by lamplight, the notes she wrote that gave pain borders and gave hope room. Neither needs speeches. Their story moves on the humble wheels of chores, patience and kept promise. They start downhill, fingers interlaced, shoulders brushing like quiet punctuation. Neighbors wave. A veteran salutes with 2 fingers. A mother practicing signs smiles through tears when her daughter mirrors home. At the gate, Boone steps aside so Lila enters first. Habit turned into respect. He lights a porch lamp and sets the journal inside, safe from dew. She waters time through soil already glistens, because care repeated becomes character, and character keeps towns gentle when weather turns. Crickets pulse, a moth taps the chimney, the dog huffs and dreams. Boone pours 2 tin cups of tea and writes a closing line. We will be here when you come back. Lila fits her fingers over his and nods. She looks long at the valley and imagines a reader in another county holding these sentences, deciding quiet strength is not absence but power trained to kindness. She imagines a mother learning 3 signs so a daughter never fears a locked stall again. She imagines Harlan choosing a plainer path. She imagines new friends carrying the invitation forward, come here with your eyes, and strangers arriving as neighbor. Boone folds a blanket around her shoulders. They sit on the steps until the stars steady and the creek lays a ribbon of light. Thank you for staying with Lila's journey, he says again, not to fill the air but to honor time freely given. If her silence spoke louder than voices, if her courage showed love needs no sound, hit that hype button, share the page, bring someone who needs gentleness. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of resilience, romance and redemption in the untamed frontier. Come ready to listen, leave carrying light. In the wild, love doesn't shout, it waits to be listened to. See you next, partner. They finish the tea and turn another page together, letting ink catch what tomorrow will ask. Mending wire, teaching a new word, kneading dough, writing truth as it comes. Before sleep, Lila opens the journal at the first entry and then the last, tracing the distance between like a trail mapped by lanterns. Hunger and work, bread and water, hands and truth. She closes the cover, rests it against Boone's chest and smiles. Time to walk the ridge one more minute. They climb back to the rise where twilight has deepened and the town looks like a sky fallen to earth. Lanterns blink, someone laughs near the cottonwood, a child runs after a crumpled ribbon and catches it. Boone sets the journal on a flat rock and weighs it with a small stone so the breeze can't turn pages. Lila presses her locket, then opens both palms toward Sagebrush Hollow in a gesture as wide as the valley. Whatever arrives next, frost, drought, a new baby's cry, a stranger's question will find them here. They will answer with steadiness and welcome. Tonight belongs to gratitude and invitation. Thank you for staying with Lila's journey. If her silence spoke louder than voices, if her courage showed love needs no sound, hit that hype button. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of resilience, romance and redemption in the untamed frontier. In the wild, love doesn't shout, it waits to be listened to. See you next, partner. Boone picks up the book. Lila takes his arm. Together they walk down among lanterns and laughter, carrying the practice of listening like a lantern of their own, bright enough to share, gentle enough to shelter, ready for the next chapter the valley will write with them. As they near the cottonwood, the mayor's wife lifts a basket of buns toward them. Boone shakes his head, grinning, and points to a family with a long ride ahead, and she nods and turns, gift redirected without fuss. Lila stops beside the school bench, runs her palm along the plank Boone planed, and feels ghost heat from afternoon hands. She signs until tomorrow to the bench itself, then traces the tiny nick where Eli dropped a slate and apologized with a story instead of a flick. Down the lane, the blacksmith hangs a bell on a nail and lets it answer night with one patient note. Wind shifts. Sage rises. A cloud crosses the moon and slides away. Boone leans close and whispers that listening has begun to sound like belonging. A music even he, loud all his life, can finally hear. Lila laughs without voice, touches the corner of his mouth and signs good. They enter their yard while the town dims to embers and the story continues.